Purr! The neon sign for Miller's 24-hour deli flickered with a rhythmic hum, casting a bruised purple glow over the rain-slicked Brooklyn pavement. Inside, the air smelled of roasting coffee, floor wax, and the damp metallic scent of a New York midnight. Erica Thompson adjusted the gold hoops in her ears and smoothed her apron. At 50, Erica didn't just walk, she presided. Her skin was the color of deep mahogany, lined only by the faint, elegant marks of a woman who had laughed often and suffered no fools. She was the neighborhood's heartbeat, the woman who knew whose son was in jail and whose daughter just got into Howard. The clock above the humming soda fridge ticked toward 11 p.m. The bell above the door chimed, a sharp silver sound that usually heralded a delivery driver or a late-night stoner. But tonight, as it had for the past 7 nights, the atmosphere in the store shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with a sudden freezing elegance. He was back. Ha-Jun stepped through the door like a panther entering a cage it already owned. He was 40, but he carried the gravity of a man who had lived 100 violent lifetimes. His suit was charcoal silk, tailored so perfectly it looked like armor, and his hair was swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold, aristocratic distance. To the rest of the world, he was the Ice King of the Kong Syndicate. Here, he was just the man who bought the expensive sparkling water. He didn't look at the aisles. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked only at Erica. Before he could reach the counter, the peace was shattered. A young man, jittery and smelling of cheap gin, slammed a crumpled $5 bill onto the counter. "Give me 2 packs of Newports and a lighter, lady. Hurry up, I got a ride waiting," the kid barked, his eyes darting toward the door. Erica didn't blink. She didn't even reach for the cigarettes. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the counter, her gaze as steady as a mountain. "First of all," she said, her voice a rich, soulful contralto that hummed with authority, "you're short $2. Second of all, your mother didn't raise you to holler at a woman of my vintage. Take your $5, go back out that door, and come back in when you remember your manners. Or don't come back at all. My night is too pretty for your noise." The kid opened his mouth to snap back, but then he caught sight of the man standing 3 feet behind him. Ha-Jun hadn't moved a muscle, but his aura had turned lethal. His hands were folded casually in front of him, yet there was a predatory stillness in his eyes that made the kid's blood turn to ice. It was the look of a man who could erase a person from existence without wrinkling his sleeve. The kid grabbed his $5 and bolted. Erica exhaled a short, sharp laugh, the fireworks Ha-Jun had become addicted to. "Lord, the youth today," she muttered, shaking her head. She turned her attention to the man in the charcoal suit. He was harmless. You didn't have to scare the poor boy into a heart attack, you know. Ha-Jun stepped up to the counter. He placed a single glass bottle of Voss water on the linoleum. He didn't speak. He never did. But he looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the way her presence filled the cramped, dusty store until the walls felt like they were made of gold. "He was disrespectful," Ha-Jun said. His voice was a deep, low rasp, the sound of velvet dragged over stone. It was the first time he had spoken more than 2 words to her. Erica arched a perfectly groomed brow. "I can handle a little disrespect, honey. I've been doing it since before you were in long pants." Ha-Jun's lips didn't move, but his eyes, dark, obsidian depths, seemed to soften by a fraction of a millimeter. He was a man who commanded thousands, who moved billions with a phone call. Yet he felt a strange magnetic pull toward this woman behind a plexiglass shield. She was vibrant. She was real. She was the only thing in the city that didn't feel like a lie. "You should not have to handle it," Ha-Jun replied. He reached into his breast pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. He slid it across the counter. "Keep the change, Erica." She froze, her hand hovering over the register. "How do you know my name? I don't wear a tag." Ha-Jun paused at the door. He turned his head just enough for the neon light to catch the sharp line of his jaw. I make it my business to know the names of things that interest me. He stepped out into the rain, leaving the scent of expensive sandalwood and cold winter air behind. Erica stood there, the $100 bill warm under her fingers, her heart doing a slow, heavy roll in her chest. She was 50 years old, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had just been hunted by a king. The penthouse boardroom of the Manhattan Grand looked like a cathedral of glass, but by 9 p.m., it smelled like copper and adrenaline. A silver-plated letter opener sat embedded in the mahogany table, inches from a rival's hand. Ha-Jun didn't move. He sat at the head of the table, his overcoat draped over his shoulders like a shroud, his expression as unreadable as a frozen lake. His men, shadows in the corner, waited for the word to turn this merger into a massacre. The docks are mine, Ha-Jun said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. And your silence is the only thing keeping your heart beating. Leave. The rivals scrambled, the air in the room rushing out with them. Ha-Jun didn't look at the signatures on the multi-billion-dollar contracts. He looked at his hands. They were steady, cold, and utterly lonely. He felt the familiar, crushing weight of his world, a world of ghosts and ledgers. He needed the light. He needed the fire. In her small apartment in Bed-Stuy, Erica Thompson stood before her vanity. She was 50 years old, and she knew every curve and line of her body was a trophy of survival. Usually, she threw her hair into a quick bun and wore a dash of lip balm for the night shift. Tonight, she lingered. She traced a line of gold eyeliner across her lids, the shimmer making the amber in her eyes pop. She picked out a pair of brass-hammered earrings that brushed her collarbones and stepped into a pair of boots that made her feel 6 feet tall. Under her drab deli apron, she wore a silk camisole the color of a sunset. You're acting like a schoolgirl, Erica, she whispered to her reflection. But as she caught the way her mahogany skin glowed under the bathroom light, she didn't care. For the first time in 20 years, she felt seen. Not as a mother, not as a neighbor, not as a cashier, but as a woman who could make a man like him stop breathing for a second. 11 p.m. The bell chimed. Erica was laughing, leaning over the counter as she told a joke to the local beat cop, her laughter filling the store like a warm melody. The cop left, and the air immediately changed. The temperature seemed to drop, the atmosphere sharpening. Ha-Jun walked in. He looked different tonight. His tie was loosened, a rare crack in his armor. There was a shadow of exhaustion in the hollows of his cheeks, and a dark, dangerous energy clung to him like smoke from a battlefield. He stopped at the counter. He didn't pick up the water. He just looked at her. His eyes swept over her. The gold on her lids, the way the silk peeked out from her apron, the defiance in her posture. His obsidian gaze burned with an intensity that made Erica's skin prickle. You look, Ha-Jun started, his voice trailing off as he searched for a word in a language that didn't feel cold. Stunning, Erica. Erica leaned on her elbows, her fireworks personality sparking despite the weight of his gaze. You look like you've been through a war, honey. Who's winning, you or the world? Ha-Jun let out a short, breathy sound, the closest thing to a laugh she'd heard from him. He reached out, his long, elegant fingers hovering just inches from hers on the counter. Until 5 minutes ago, the world. Now, I think I am. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was a conversation. It was the language of two people who had spent their lives being the strongest person in the room, finally finding someone they could lean against. You're a dangerous man, aren't you? Erica asked softly. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded curious, like she was poking a sleeping lion just to see him growl. I am a man of many debts, Ha-Jun replied, his voice dropping to a gravelly, intimate register. But tonight, I am just a man who cannot stop thinking about a woman in a Brooklyn deli. He reached out and finally closed the distance, his thumb grazing the back of her hand. The touch was electric, ice meeting fire. Erica didn't pull away. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. "You're far from home, Hajun," she whispered. "I think," he said, his eyes locked onto hers with a sudden, terrifying clarity. "I am exactly where I need to be. But this store, it is too small for you. This city is too gray for you." Erica felt her heart hammer against her ribs. "And what's the alternative?" Hajun leaned in, the scent of expensive sandalwood and cold rain enveloping her. "Come to Seoul. I have a life there that needs your light. I have an estate that is a tomb until you walk through the doors." Erica laughed, though her breath was shaky. "You're crazy. I've got a life here. I've got bills. I've got—" "I will pay the bills. I will pay for the life," Hajun interrupted, his grip on her hand tightening. "I want to see what happens when the Ice King brings the fireworks home." For a moment, the hum of the neon sign and the distant sirens of New York faded. There was only the heat of his hand and the impossible, addictive pull of a new beginning. The rain wasn't just falling tonight. It was grieving. It hammered against the thin glass of the deli, a rhythmic, lonely sound that matched the hollow ache in Hajun's chest. In 2 hours, a private Gulfstream G650 would be waiting at Teterboro to whisk him back to the gray steel and glass hierarchy of Seoul. He had spent his life building an empire of shadows and silence, and he had been content in the cold. But then he had stepped into this dusty, neon-lit corner of Brooklyn and found a sun that didn't burn him. She warmed him. The bell chimed. 11 p.m. Erica was waiting. She wasn't behind the register this time. She was stocking a shelf of bread, her back to the door. She didn't have to turn around to know it was him. The air always sharpened when he arrived, vibrating with a high-voltage tension that made the hair on her arms stand up. "You're late," she said, her voice a low, smooth melody that cut through the sound of the rain. "And you're leaving." Hajun stopped in the center of the narrow aisle. He looked out of place among the bags of potato chips and laundry detergent. A predator in a paper bag world. "How do you know?" Erica turned, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at him with that knowing, soulful gaze that made him feel like a glass house. "The suit is different. The watch is different. And your eyes? They look like you're already 10,000 miles away." Hajun stepped closer, invading her space until the scent of his sandalwood cologne overwhelmed the smell of stale coffee. "I cannot stay, Erica. My world is calling me back. It is a world of duty, blood, and cold stone." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And since I met you, the thought of returning to it feels like a death sentence." He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a love letter. It was a manifesto of power. "I don't just want you in my memory," Hajun whispered, his voice cracking the Ice King facade. "I want you in my life. This is a contract. You will be the director of my private estate in Seoul. You will manage the staff, the grounds, and, if you allow it, the man who owns them." Erica looked at the envelope but didn't take it yet. "I'm a cashier from Brooklyn, Hajun. I don't know the first thing about running a palace in Korea." "I don't need a manager," he countered, his obsidian eyes burning with a sudden desperate fire. "I need a soul. I need your fire in that house. The salary is 10 times what you earn here. Your debts? Gone. Your future? Secured. You will have everything." Erica took the envelope. She opened it, her eyes widening as she saw the numbers. It wasn't just a job. It was a kingdom. She looked around the cramped deli, the flickering neon, the linoleum she'd scrubbed for years, the life she had built by playing it safe, by being the reliable one, the woman who never took the leap because she was too busy holding the net for everyone else. She was 50 years old. She had spent 5 decades being exactly what the world expected her to be. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "There are 1,000 women in Seoul who speak your language, who know your customs. Women who are younger. Hajun stepped so close his chest brushed her shoulder. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with the reverence that made her breath hitch. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, his touch a searing brand of ice and heat. They are all shadows, he said. You are the fireworks. I have spent 40 years in the dark, Erica. I am not going back. Come to Seoul. Be my light. Be my trouble. Just come. Erica looked at the man before her, dangerous, powerful, and utterly undone by her. She thought of the adventure she'd never had, the colors she'd never seen, the passion she'd never allowed herself to feel. She felt the fireworks inside her chest ignite, a brilliant, terrifying explosion of yes. I don't bow to anyone, Hajun, she warned, a spark of Brooklyn defiance in her eyes. Not even kings. A slow, predatory, and incredibly rare smile spread across Hajun's face. He leaned down, his lips ghosting over hers. I am counting on it. Then pack your bags, Ice King, Erica breathed against his lips. Brooklyn is coming to Seoul. The private jet had been a dream of champagne and heated leather, but as the sleek black sedan pulled through the towering obsidian gates of the Kang estate in the hills of Seongbuk-dong, reality hit Erica Thompson like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress of glass and steel, perched over the neon-veined valley of Seoul like a predator's watchtower. When the car door opened, a line of 6 people, all dressed in identical, razor-sharp black uniforms, bowed in perfect, terrifying unison. The silence was so heavy, it felt like a physical weight. Welcome home, Chairman, they intoned as one. Erica stepped out, her Brooklyn tough exterior momentarily faltering as she took in the sheer scale of the opulence. The air up here smelled of pine needles and ozone. She felt like a splash of vibrant color in a world of grayscale. She was still wearing her favorite denim jacket over a bold, mustard yellow dress, her curls defying the humidity and her gold hoops catching the afternoon sun. Ha-Jun stepped out after her. The moment his feet hit the pavement, his posture changed. The man who had leaned on her deli counter in New York vanished. In his place stood a monarch. His face was a mask of cold granite, his eyes shielded by dark glasses. Mrs. O, Ha-Jun said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. A woman with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful stepped forward. She was the head of the household, and her eyes, as they swept over Erica, were filled with a clinical, icy disapproval. The guest quarters are prepared, Chairman, Mrs. O said, her Korean formal and sharp. She didn't look at Erica's face. She looked at her boots. We did not expect such a presence. Erica felt the sting, but she didn't shrink. She never shrank. She walked right up to Mrs. O, extending a hand that was decorated with a single, elegant gold ring. I'm Erica, and presence is exactly what you're going to get, honey. Nice to meet you. Mrs. O stared at the hand as if it were a strange, exotic insect. She didn't take it. She simply bowed again, a shallow, insulting gesture, and turned to the staff. Take the bags. Be silent. Inside, the estate was a masterpiece of minimalism. Every surface was marble or glass. There were no family photos, no clutter, no noise. It was a tomb for a living king. As they walked toward the grand staircase, Erica caught Ha-Jun's arm. Hey, Ice King, you want to tell me why your staff looks like they're waiting for a funeral? And why nobody's allowed to talk? Ha-Jun stopped. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her. For a split second, the coldness in his eyes flickered, the ghost of the New York nights appearing behind the mask. He was struggling. He had spent 20 years perfecting this wall of professional detachment, but Erica was a wrecking ball. This is how things are done here, Erica, he said, his voice low. Order is safety. Silence is respect. You are in my world now. Your world is freezing, Hajun, she whispered, stepping into his personal space. The scent of his sandalwood cologne was the only familiar thing in this strange land. Don't think you can bring me all the way across the ocean and then hide behind that suit. I know the man who likes 5-cent lemon drops. Hajun's jaw tightened. He could feel the eyes of his staff on them, the whispers that would surely start among the syndicate's lower ranks. He was supposed to be untouchable, but the way Erica looked at him, with heat, with challenge, with life, threatened to burn his carefully constructed empire to the ground. You have your duties, he said, his voice regaining its steel as he pulled his arm away. Mrs. O will show you the estate. I have meetings until midnight. Do not wander. He walked away, his footsteps echoing like gunshots on the marble. Midnight came and went. Erica couldn't sleep. The silk sheets were too soft, the room too quiet. She needed noise. She needed a soul. She wandered down to the kitchen, a cavernous space of stainless steel. She found a young girl, barely 20, scrubbing a floor that was already spotless. The girl jumped when she saw Erica, dropping her brush and bowing frantically. Whoa, whoa! Stop that, Erica said, reaching down to grab the girl's shoulders. What's your name, sugar? The girl looked terrified. Jihu, ma'am. Well, Jihu, I'm starving, and I bet you are too. Is there any of that kimchi left? And maybe some eggs? Back in Brooklyn, we don't scrub floors at 1 a.m. without a snack. Erica didn't wait for permission. She pulled up a stool, cracked an egg, and started talking. She told Jihu about the subway, about the deli, and about how she once chased a shoplifter for 3 blocks in heels. Slowly, the girl's shoulders dropped. A tiny, hesitant smile touched her lips. For the first time, the fortress felt like a home. What is this? The voice was a thunderclap. Hajun stood in the doorway, his coat off, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked at his elite maid eating eggs with a commoner, and he looked at Erica, who was laughing with a mouthful of rice. The Ice King was failing. He was supposed to be angry. He was supposed to maintain the hierarchy. But as he watched Erica, vibrant, warm, and utterly unbothered by his power, he felt a terrifying, addictive surge of love. I told you not to wander, he said, but the bite was gone from his voice. Erica wiped her mouth and smirked. And I told you I don't bow to kings. Want some eggs, Hajun? Or are you too busy being powerful to eat? Hajun looked at the girl, who scurried away, and then he looked at Erica. The silence between them grew thick, but it wasn't the cold silence of the estate. It was the heavy, electric silence of the New York night. He walked toward her, his eyes dark with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. The Grand Hyatt Soul's ballroom was a cathedral of cold gold and predatory ambition. This was the Emerald Gala, the annual gathering where the titans of Korean industry and the shadows of the underworld rubbed silk-clad shoulders. Hajun stood near the champagne fountain, his presence creating a 6-foot radius of empty space. He was a monolith in a midnight blue tuxedo, his face an impenetrable mask of boredom. But beneath the surface, his nerves were frayed. He was waiting. Then, the double doors at the top of the grand staircase swept open. The room didn't just go quiet. It stopped breathing. Erica Thompson stepped into the light, and for the first time in the history of the Kang Syndicate, the Ice King looked vulnerable. She wore a custom-made gown of molten gold silk that clung to her 50-year-old curves like a second skin. It featured a daring slit that showed off her toned legs and a backless cut that highlighted the smooth mahogany expanse of her skin. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore the brass-hammered earrings from Brooklyn, her only piece of home. She wasn't just a guest. She was a solar flare in a room full of dying stars. As she descended, Hajun met her at the base of the stairs. He didn't offer a polite nod. He reached out, his hand settling firmly on the small of her back, a gesture of absolute possession that sent a ripple of shocked whispers through the crowd. "You are going to start a war in that dress," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that only she could hear. "Good," Erica whispered back, her eyes sparking with the fireworks he loved. "I was getting bored of your quiet house, Hajun." For an hour, Erica played the part of estate manager with a sharp-witted brilliance that left the elderly directors stammering. She navigated the treacherous waters of Korean etiquette with the street smarts of a woman who had handled Brooklyn's toughest, using her warmth to disarm the cold. But then came Director Park. Park was a high-ranking member of the rival Beck clan, a man who built his reputation on cruelty and old-world prejudices. He approached them, smelling of expensive scotch and malice. He didn't look at Hajun. He looked at Erica, his eyes traveling over her with a disgusting, slow deliberateness. "The chairman's tastes have become exotic," Park said in English, his voice loud enough to carry. He chuckled, a wet, oily sound. "I didn't realize the Kang Syndicate was recruiting its managers from the streets of New York. Tell me, Erica, does the job require you to be in the chairman's bed or just his kitchen? At your age, I imagine the kitchen is safer." The ballroom went deathly silent. Erica's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned to flint. She opened her mouth to deliver a Brooklyn-style verbal execution, but she never got the chance. The crack happened. In a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to follow, Hajun moved. He didn't punch Park. He stepped into the man's space, his hand shooting out like a viper to seize Park's right hand, the one holding a crystal tumbler. Hajun squeezed. The sound of the glass shattering was followed immediately by the sickening crunch of bone. Park let out a strangled, high-pitched scream as he was forced to his knees. Hajun didn't let go. He leaned down, his face inches from Park's, his expression so devoid of humanity, it was terrifying. "You breathed near her," Hajun whispered, his voice sounding like shifting tectonic plates. "You thought a thought about her, and then you spoke it." "Hajun, stop!" Erica gasped, reaching for his arm. He didn't stop. He twisted Park's mangled hand further. "If you ever look in her direction again, if you even dream of her name, I will not just break your hand. I will erase your entire bloodline from the soul registers. Do you understand?" Park sobbed a desperate yes, and Hajun tossed him aside like a piece of trash. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket, wiped the blood and glass from his hand, and turned back to the room. The elite of Soul backed away in terror. The Ice King hadn't just cracked. He had shattered, revealing the monster underneath. Minutes later, Hajun dragged Erica toward a private balcony, the cold night air hitting them like a slap. He was vibrating with a dark, violent energy, his chest heaving. "Are you okay?" he demanded, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes searching her face for any sign of trauma. Erica looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the blood on his cuff and the terrifying raw protectiveness in his gaze. She realized then that this wasn't just a romance. This man didn't just love her. He worshipped her with a violence that was both exhilarating and frightening. "You almost killed him, Hajun," she said softly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He insulted you," Hajun growled, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "I have spent 40 years building a world where nothing touches me. And then you walked into it. Now, everything touches me. If you are hurt, I am destroyed. I cannot control it, Erica. I don't want to control it." Erica reached up, her fingers trembling as she traced the line of his jaw. The Ice King was gone, replaced by a man who would burn the world down to keep her warm. "Then don't," she whispered. "Just hold me." He pulled her into him, crushing her against his chest as the neon lights of Soul blurred behind them. The war had officially begun. The silence of the Kang estate was never peaceful. It was a held breath. It was 2 a.m. Erica stood in the darkened kitchen, the moonlight reflecting off the stainless steel surfaces. She was nursing a cup of herbal tea, her mind racing with the memory of Ha-jun's hand crushing Director Park's bones. She should have been packing her bags. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a magnetic, grounding pull toward the man who had done it. The lights didn't flicker. They simply died. Erica froze. The high-tech hum of the house vanished, replaced by the heavy, pressurized silence of a vacuum. Then, the sound of a window shattering. Not in the front, but in the private study. She didn't scream. Brooklyn had taught her that a scream was a waste of breath. She set her tea down silently and moved toward the shadows of the hallway. She saw him then. Ha-jun was emerging from his room, but he wasn't the CEO in a tailored suit. He was shirtless, wearing only black trousers, his torso a map of jagged scars that told the story of a decade of war. In his hand was a sleek, matte black handgun. His eyes weren't ice anymore. They were void. "Erica," he hissed, his voice a ghost's whisper. "Get in the pantry. Lock the steel door. Do not come out until I open it." "Ha-jun, go!" He moved with a predatory fluidness that made her heart stop. Two men in tactical gear rounded the corner. Ha-jun didn't hesitate. Two muffled thuds echoed in the hall, and the men collapsed. It was clinical. It was terrifying. It was the Ice King in his true element. But there was a third man. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling molding above the study door. A Bet Clan assassin who had been waiting for the chairman to pass. He dropped behind Ha-jun, a garrote wire glinting in the moonlight. Ha-jun was focused on the stairs, his senses overwhelmed by the feedback of the dying security system. "Ha-jun! Behind you!" Erica screamed. As the assassin lunged, Erica didn't run. She grabbed the heavy, decorative marble bust of a Korean scholar from the hallway pedestal. With the strength of a woman who had spent 30 years lifting crates in a bodega, she hurled it. It didn't hit the assassin's head, but it smashed into his shoulder with a sickening crack. The man stumbled, the garrote missing Ha-jun's throat by an inch. That inch was all Ha-jun needed. He spun, his face a mask of demonic fury. He didn't use the gun. He caught the assassin's throat in one hand and slammed him into the glass wall of the atrium. The glass spider-webbed, but didn't break. Ha-jun's grip tightened until the man's eyes rolled back. He dropped the body like it was nothing more than a used cigarette. Silence returned, heavier than before. Ha-jun turned to Erica. He was heaving, his chest slick with sweat and the spray of blood from the first two men. He looked like a god of death. He expected her to look at him with horror. He expected her to see the monster and finally run back to the safety of New York. Erica walked toward him. Her hands were shaking, but her gaze was steady. She reached out and touched the jagged scar over his ribs. "You're bleeding," she whispered. Ha-jun grabbed her wrists, his grip iron tight. "You stayed. You could have been killed. Why didn't you hide?" "Because you were out here," Erica said, her voice cracking with the weight of the adrenaline. "I told you, Ha-jun. I don't leave people behind, especially not the man who looks at me like I'm the only thing in the world that matters. The Ice King broke." He pulled her into him with a desperation that was almost violent. His mouth found hers in a collision of heat, a kiss that tasted of iron and longing. It wasn't the polite kiss of a CEO. It was the claim of a man who had almost lost his soul. He lifted her and carried her into the master suite. He kicked the door shut, locking the world of blood and mafia wars outside. It was a night of revelation. Every touch was an admission. Ha-jun worshipped her. Her age, her wisdom, the soft curves of her body that felt like home. He was 40, a man of steel, but under Erica's touch, he was malleable. She was the fireworks, and tonight, she lit up every dark corner of his soul. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay tangled in sweat-dampened silk, Ha-jun pulled her against his chest. He kissed the top of her head, his heart beating a steady rhythm against her ear. It isn't a spark anymore, is it? She whispered into the dark. No, Hajun replied, his voice thick with a devotion that changed the trajectory of his life forever. It's a fire, and I will let it burn my whole empire down before I let it go out. The morning light in Seoul was usually a soft, pearlescent gray, but today it felt sharp, cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate like a scalpel. The household staff didn't just bow, they trembled. Madame Kang, the dowager of the syndicate, had arrived without a phone call. She sat in the center of the minimalist drawing room, a woman carved from ivory and malice. At 70, she was a relic of a harder time. Her hanbok, a deep, traditional indigo. Her hair pulled into a knot so tight it seemed to sharpen her already lethal cheekbones. She didn't look at the gardens. She looked at the woman standing across from her. Erica stood her ground. She was wearing a deep, plum-colored silk wrap dress that complemented the rich mahogany of her skin, her hair a crown of natural curls. She felt the weight of Madame Kang's gaze, a look that tried to calculate her worth, and found it lacking. I am told, Madame Kang began, her voice a thin, terrifying rasp in perfect English, that my son found a stray in New York. I expected a girl, a momentary lapse in judgment, a toy. Her eyes flickered over the fine lines around Erica's eyes, the maturity in her posture. I did not expect a woman who has already seen her best years. Erica didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her tea, her gaze never leaving the older woman's. Funny, Erica said, her Brooklyn lilt smooth and dangerous. Ha-Jun told me his mother was a woman of tradition. I didn't realize that tradition included being rude to a guest in your son's home. In my neighborhood, we call that having no home training. Madame Kang's teacup clattered against the saucer. The air in the room turned brittle. You are a ghost in this house, Miss Thompson. You do not speak the language. You do not understand the blood that paid for these floors. You are a 50-year-old cashier from a city of dirt. You are an interruption to a lineage that goes back centuries. Madame Kang reached into her silk sleeve and pulled out a small lacquered box. She set it on the table and pushed it toward Erica. Inside was a bank draft. The number of zeros was enough to buy a block of Manhattan real estate. Take it, Madame Kang commanded. Go back to your little shop. Find a man of your own kind, of your own age. Leave my son to the woman we have chosen for him, a woman who can give him the heirs the syndicate requires. Erica looked at the check. She didn't touch it. Instead, a slow, melodic laugh bubbled up from her chest. The fireworks that at first captivated Hajun. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated amusement. You think this is a movie, honey? Erica leaned forward, her amber eyes burning. You think you can just write a check and erase the way your son looks at me? You can't buy what isn't for sale. I didn't come here for his money. I have my own hands and my own heart. I came here because Hajun was freezing to death in this museum of yours, and I'm the only one who knows how to light the fire. She pushed the box back across the marble table. Keep your change, madame. You're going to need it to pay for the wedding flowers. Erica! The voice was a low growl from the doorway. Ha-Jun stood there, his suit jacket off, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the tattoos that marked him as the king. His face was a mask of conflicting agonies. Mother, he said, bowing deeply, a habit of blood duty that made Erica's heart ache. You should not be here. I am where I must be, Madame Kang snapped in Korean, her voice rising. You would throw away the Beck merger? You would throw away our standing for this foreigner? She is old, Hae-Jun. She is a dead end for our bloodline. Look at her. She does not belong in our world.